Good afternoon.
Hi, Sungwoo. How you doing?
Uh, Thank you for everyone for joining us for today's webinar, The Successful Test Prep Mindset presented by Smart with a Heart. My name is Sang Kang, Digital Engagement and Marketing Specialist at CJ Alumni Association. And today I'm pleased to host one of our corporate partners, Smart with a Heart, which is America's first nonprofit test prep program. And please welcome Nafiz Amin, co-founder of Smart with a Heart. Um, they're thrilled to, their mission is to level the admissions playing field by making premium interpersonal test prep and admissions advice accessible to most Americans who are preparing for test like I am. So I'm excited for today's webinar, and we're thrilled to have you here to deliver this webinar to our alumni. So
Oh, thank you so much. I'm honored to be here. The Coast Guard Academy is a wonderful institution, and it's definitely part of Smart the Heart's mission to help military veterans transition to graduate school and beyond, should they wish. And I know full well, having done this for almost 2 decades, I know full well how much misinformation is out there, and how some of the information is very counterproductive to people, and at some points threatening. Uh, and our organization um, has always been mission driven to try to help people increase their improve their trajectory in their professional life. And so we're doing our small part to try to help. And our nonprofit, Smart the Heart, is really interested in helping military folks, under-resourced individuals get into graduate school, because often they're overlooked. Far too often they're overlooked. So with that, for those of you on the call, please feel free to chat. Feel free to interrupt. There's no such thing as interrupting as far as I'm concerned. I'm here for you. Please ask any question you like. I can take this any direction you wish. I do have some slides prepared to help some of you think and frame the decision of testing. But if it comes to the GMAT, the GRE, even SATs, ACTs is probably in your rear view. But any grad school admission stuff, I feel fairly confident in being able to field that question. So that said, let's get started. I'm the president of Sherpa Prep. It's a mission-driven test prep organization that does GMAT and GRE and admissions consulting. And I co-founded Smart with the Heart to increase the number of people that we can help. And as Sangwoo said, I don't know what to say about this. We are the first nonprofit in this space, and I'm not sure whether to be happy about that or sad. It's mixed feelings. But as I said, we are trying to level the playing field by making high quality, super high quality test prep available, accessible to everybody. So to start, why even bother testing? What's the point? What's the point of the GMAT, the GRE, the LSAT, the MCAT, the SATs and ACTs of your past? What's the point? Well, there are three, honestly. And some of them are a bit more palatable than others. One is that the curricula on these exams isn't made in a vacuum. Okay, the test maker, the psychometrician, the psychologist who measures your mind, that's what a psychometrician does, psychometric. They are engaged with schools, and the schools are engaged with postgraduate outcomes. So the graduate school you want to apply to might have a research focus, which is, okay, we want to create researchers. Those researchers might go to the private sector or stay in academia. If you want to go to an MBA program, well, You're probably not going to do research or go into academia post MBA. You probably aren't. You're probably going to go to the private sector. So those MBA programs engage with consultancies, banks, and tech companies and ask them, what do you need? So where we are at this moment in our journey is pre-grad school, pre-professional trajectory change, right? So the curricula on these exams is in consultation with what the schools want, and what the schools want is often in consultation with the postgraduate outcomes. What do they want? What kind of skills would they be looking for? So on one level, these tests are examinations of readiness. Now, I say that with a salt lick of salt, okay? Every program that you will apply to will look at your candidacy holistically, okay? They will look at everything, your socioeconomics, your undergrad, the GPA, the trajectory of your GPA, the rigor of the courses you took, your job, what have you done post college, what do you do in the community, social impact. They'll look at your essays, they'll likely interview you, they'll definitely look for recommendations. So they're going to get all these different data points to figure out holistically what is the point of this candidacy. The standardized test is but one data point. It is not going to make or break any of you in your applications. There are, 8 or 9 other factors that go into play as well. So what a standardized test is simply, well, let's say for an MBA program, whether you are going to become a banker or a consultant or a nonprofit leader or go to government service or whatever, at some point you're going to have to deal with forecasting revenue, money management, marketing budgets. There's going to be decisions on human capital. Should I hire 4 salespeople or 5? Well, at some point, there's going to be some quantitative requirements. The boss is the person who cuts the checks. So at some point, you have to be able to forecast money coming in and money going out. It doesn't matter whether it's a private company or a nonprofit. So what a standardized test would look at, the GRE, perhaps, well, they won't test like postgraduate skills. They'll test pre-school skills. They'll test, can you do algebra? Can you solve for X? Can you calculate percent change? Like very basic levels. And so if a student struggles with the stuff on the test, which is meant to be low-hanging fruit, then it's a data point that might be concerning, because when you go to school, it's going to be far more difficult than this. So it's a basic test of readiness, but it's not everything. If you have a great GPA and a great job and your job has elements that are going to be used in school, then the standardized test doesn't really matter too much. It won't matter. Okay. Look at your candidacy holistically. Another thing that is worth mentioning is a standardized test. I want to focus on the word standard, standardization versus subjectivity. Those other factors I mentioned, the GPA, the trajectory of your GPA, your job, your social activities, your extracurriculars, interviewing, recommenders, believe it or not, everything but the standardized test has a high degree of subjectivity attached to it. How do you measure one person's career versus another? It's especially if they're from different fields. How do you compare like a Coast Guard Academy graduate's career versus a consultant's career 5 years in? Not obviously, it's not an obvious comp, right? But when you apply to grad school, they will compare you somehow. right? They're going to try to figure out which of these is gold, which of these is silver, which of these is bronze for this 5-year or 10-year um, postgraduate person, post undergraduate person. Uh, how do you decide who did better in an interview? Subjectively, interviews are conducted by pretty much everybody, schools, employers, everyone pretty much conducts interviews. But every study says they're highly subjective and they're fraught with peril. Well, most studies will tell you that people interviewing will look for qualities that are familiar. Basically, this is oversimplifying something, but basically, we look for our favorite cousin. That's who we're going to hire. Maybe not our sibling, but like, oh, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, it's like, oh, this person reminds me of a person I really like. Come on board. And that's a highly subjective thing, and it's not equitable, to be honest. But that's what we do. Even GPA is subjective because, you know, and this is maybe not an obvious point to some, but a 3.4 GPA is not necessarily better than a 3.2 or a 3.1. It might not be because what was that 3.4 in? What was the major? And does the school have grade inflation or deflation? Think about that. Like, not all schools are equal in terms of how they hand out A's. And even within a school, not all majors are equal. So how do you compare a 3.2 in physics from Caltech versus a 3.6 in poli-sci from Georgetown? How do you compare? It's not obvious what you do with those numbers. So even the comparison of GPA, which seems to be standard, it's far from standard. The only thing that is standard that everyone must take is this exam, should there be a requirement, right? Everything else is subjective, and everyone's different lived experience and life experiences create these snowflakes of candidacies. So one reason standardized tests exist is that it gives the admissions person at least one data point to make a comparison when things really aren't that comparable. So the readiness part may be palatable. The standardization element, it might make some sense, even though you don't want to take a test, but it might make some sense if you were to flip the chessboard around to be on the other side. It's like, what would you do between a 3.6 here and a 3.2 here if this was a harder school to get into and a much more difficult curriculum? What would you do? Well, you might want more data, right? The third element is selectivity. This is the one that I think is less palatable. This is the one that, frankly, it's in my view a little less friendly, but it's true. Obviously, schools have benefited from being selective. Schools benefit from not letting as many people in as they might be able to. Okay, that's associated with prestige, and it's a flywheel effect. Well, this school doesn't let anyone in. That means I really want to go there, and that then signals to employers, oh wow, these are very highly select people, and they've already been vetted. That's where we want to recruit from. So it's just, I wouldn't call it it's not a virtuous cycle, but it is a flywheel effect that I think we all know. And even at the Coast Guard, for sure. We are, as humans, drawn to selectivity. And one way to measure selectivity objectively is like, okay, why don't we have higher and higher numbers, or higher and higher test scores? This is where I don't think it's palatable, because I've been doing this for 20 years and our company's taught 15,000, somewhere between 15,000 and 20,000 students. And I've personally taught between 5 and 10. I know for a fact that the numbers themselves do not tell the full story. And the schools themselves, the admissions people will tell you the same thing. So this is where there's an optics issue versus a good for society issue that we are running right up against. So the selectivity is not something the schools ever want to talk about out loud, but business has been good. That's for sure. The fewer students people schools let in, the better it is for them. And that's where we might want to reevaluate what's the point of an educational institution. Is it the point to educate, or is the point to close the door? But that's a conversation bigger than me, for sure. The benefits of preparation. Obviously, you might want to make a pivot into some other industry, and graduate school will likely help you, right? It might give you the training and the internship opportunity, and through the academic rigor, you can understand what's going on in this industry you want to pivot to, and within 1 year or 2 years, you are now completely ready to pivot into something else. You're ready to run in a new industry. So that's cool. You can also gain skills in management, in numbers, in leadership that will help not just in the near term, but in the long term, help you figure out how to manage people and teams and things. So it can help your trajectory, not just in the short term to pivot, but in the long term, ideally, as well. And that's even beyond like networking opportunities and joining a new club, having a, a a membership in a WhatsApp group that can help you get a warm introduction to something, right? There's downstream network effects as well. The second benefit is self-actualization. This is definitely idiosyncratic, it's definitely personal, but ultimately, I think all of us want to spend our time in the way we all want to, right? So self-actualization is, how am I spending my day? For whom am I spending my day? For what am I spending my day? And a grad school might be a vehicle, a conduit towards on that journey, on that path to call the shots. And it's not just motivated by money. Money's certainly important in our society, but I know for this group in particular, all of you chose to serve. So it's not, money's not everything. So there's other things as well that you are looking for. But I think at some point we all will come to the reality like, oh, time is the most important resource, and self-actualization is something we aspire to. And you being able to pivot and maybe upskill, get that promotion, eventually you can start calling your shots a little bit more than you are now. The third benefit is doing well at school. That goes back to my readiness example. If you study reading comprehension, like the skill of reading comprehension, which is on the GMAT and the GRE, it was on the SAT as well, and the ACTs as well. Like that is reading a passage of which you have no interest. It's longer than you want it to be, and the clock is running. And it's not even well written. It's meant to be boring, if you remember reading comp from high school. Like it's not meant to be fun. It's not joyful reading. It's meant to be, here's a lot of information that you don't want about a subject you have no interest in, and the clock is running, go. What that kind of task is examining, and that's on the GMAT and the GRE, is like, can you suss out the important details? Can you get the executive summary, right? Can you figure out the main idea in 90 seconds? What's the most important point here, right? That's a skill. That's a skill in life. That's a skill in business. That's a skill in graduate school when you read and figure out what the main point is. Obviously, there's quantitative aspects of these tests as well that involve numeracy and estimation and algebra. So I just want to show you a couple of things about doing well at school. I don't know where this group might want to apply or for what you would apply, but I do have some examples of things that I pulled up today. So this is an MBA exam, not even a hard course necessarily. This is not like a special course. I looked at it. This is like a first year type course. And it's what is it? It's an econ course, econ for business decisions. So this will be an MBA type course. And obviously there's going to be some fun involved. Like in this case, it's figuring out, should you seek legal action for patent infringement? Certainly if you're a tech company or something, this might be a thing, right? And so how do you value that? Should I, shouldn't I? As you see, this devolves to what? An algebraic formulation of reality. This ultimately is going to be algebra. And so what the GMAT and the GRE would test is not this. This is for school. The GMAT and the GRE will test a much more primordial level. It's going to test this. Can you do this? And can you do it fairly quickly? And business school will add on top of it. All right, now that you have this baseline skill, all right, let's go. Let's go to work. This is something from NYU, corporate finance. Obviously, I hope that it's kind of obvious. This is going to require estimation and percent change. And I just pulled, basic questions here. These aren't, I swear to you, these aren't advanced classes. These are just core curricular classes. So this is what school is, no matter what. And you don't have to be a quant. You'll still have to take the class, right? Some of you might be interested in some other fields, public policy, something else, I don't know. So just in case it's not an MBA crowd, which is pretty common, if it's maybe a public policy crowd, I looked up some of these dissertations. And just to show you, like, yeah, if you have trouble finding X or you have trouble sussing out information, school's going to be kind of hard. Essays on international trade, firm growth in developing countries. This is all econ tracks, so that's definitely going to have math involved. You see some of these things. These are all econ tracks here. Essays on corporate taxation, and this is in the public policy school. Okay. Another one here. Public policy. It could be, most grad schools have some element of something that's going to have some quant in it, and certainly it's going to have some reading in it. So think about test prep as getting ready for the rigors of the school that you'll enter. If you can change your mindset from it being a requirement to a knowing requirement or a source of anxiety, if you can change that mindset and change it to, well, this is an opportunity. It's a data point I can give them to make up for maybe a semester or two that I wasn't really doing that well in school, or a class that I didn't do that well in. Maybe this can give them some counter evidence, right? You got a C or D in some sort of quant class. You want to go to a program that has some quant requirements. Well, you know what? Going back and taking that class again, good luck trying, right? That's a completely different deal. Or you can just study for the test. Say, listen, when I was 20, that's not who I am now, right? Think about this as an opportunity to make up for stuff. And think about the test as an opportunity to get ready. So when you get to school, school's not that hard. That's the dream. I tell my students all the time, I want you to be in your little cluster, the tutor. I want you to be the go-to person to help everyone else out because you have it all covered. School's not a problem. That means you have more time to invest in the extracurricular clubs. You have more time to network. You have more time to pivot, or more time just to relax. I want school to be as easy as possible for you in terms of meeting requirements. I want you to take full advantage and reading better, writing better, doing arithmetic better. That's what these tests are, the basic 3 R's. If you do those better, upskill, school will follow. In my years, there have been many misconceptions about these tests and how to prepare for them. So I want to spend a few minutes on this. tried to lay this out in four big things: knowledge versus skills, the learning curve, forgetting curve, and standard deviations. Okay, these are four big things I want you to take away. Most people think that preparing for a standardized test is about accumulating knowledge. Okay, much like you studied for tests in school. You have books, you have study sheets, you memorize them, and then on Tuesday at 9 a.m., you perform a basic regurgitation of what you saw. In fact, in many of our academic pursuits, we had review sheets, we had practice exams that basically told us how the test was going to go. It's very performative. Rarely in school, even in grad school, were we judged on quality or skill. Mostly we're judged on knowledge retrieval, right? And that's something I want to make sure you understand. That's not what these tests are, okay? It's very little knowledge retrieval. It's mostly about application of knowledge. Because there's a clock running, because these are all timed exams, it's not about telling them what the quadratic equation is. It's about understanding the quadratic equations even being used on this question. There are layers to it. It's like a glacier where you only see 10% and 90% beneath the surface. Most standardized test questions aren't really what they look like. There's actually a superficial element that most people, sink their teeth in. But really, that question is about some other stuff that's beneath the scenes, beneath the surface. And so it's not about memorizing a formula or memorizing 18 squared is 324. That's not what this is. It's way past that. And so the people who focus on knowledge and they get smoked by the exams, they're not really understanding what the preparation really is. It has to become way past knowledge. It's about skill, and skills are applied knowledge. So to make it, this might be imperfect, but I like the analogy. Knowledge is memorizing a recipe, and skills are cooking that recipe. And for the schools you want to go to, perhaps the more selective ones, cook it doing so better than 90% of other people, 95% of other people, right? So it's not just getting it right. It's about getting it right faster than you ever did before and faster than other people would. It's about maybe having different algorithms, different systems in place to answer a question. You might have done this one way in ninth grade, but that ninth grade system that you use to solve that problem might not be the fastest way available. And that's where people like me hopefully come in and help you. Like, no, this is that ninth grade method. Yeah, that can get you the right answer, but it's going to take you an extra minute doing it that way, an extra 5 steps doing it that way. And that's 5 more opportunities to trip and get it wrong. Plus, you conceded a minute to someone else who's already past that question, right? Think of it as a competition and think of it as a skills test, okay? I see someone in the chat. Is there a recommended, oh, hi, Laura. Is there a recommended strategy to when to take these tests? Some last 5 years, but when do you recommend as a strategy? Yeah, these tests are good for 5 years. The GMAT and the GRE have a 5-year look back. So all schools will accept them without prejudice for 5 years. I would say as to when to start preparing, it's when the student has a little bit of time. I wouldn't do this when I start a new billet or a new engagement. I'd get into some settling of my life, and not just in my job, but my personal life. We advise like having 10 hours a week to do this. Obviously, it can be done at 15. I never suggest 20, even if someone's underemployed or underutilized. 20 is way too much because there is such a thing as overstudying, and it's not about memorization. It's about skill. So we need like high quality studying because we want to not just memorize, that Gordon Ramsay recipe. We want to cook it and then cook it really well, If so, I think we can all memorize a recipe, but can we cook? We might need some tries, and we might need to go into it not at our worst hours of the day. I in our programming, we always tell our students like track when you're studying because not all hours of the day are equal. We're all human, and let's not pretend that we're the same mental agility at 10 a.m. as we are at 10 p.m. Right? And so knowing that we need to change our ways, that's how you get better scores. You actually have to change. You have to do something differently. You're more likely to be receptive to change when you are a little bit fresher. So I really, really don't like super late studying. Certainly after work is fine, but if it's after work, it's got to be after work, after dinner, after gym, after walking the dog, after some Netflix, then start and have a defined exit time. So if you start at 8:30, that's great. You have to end at 9:30 or 10. Call it. The students who have indefinite ends are the ones who go way into the night. They start the next day even less fresh, and it's not a sustainable project. I really advise our students to have a start time and a fixed end time. So you turn into a pumpkin at 9:30 or 10, whatever you say. And ideally, and this is a little, I'm stepping on my toes a little bit for down the road, but I believe in having a team to support you, an accountability team. The next complication with regard to testing is it's not going to be a straight line to the moon. There's a learning curve. And this is certainly a phrase and a concept you're all familiar with. I won't belabor it, but for whatever reason, it's not applied to standardized testing. People don't do it. People think that every exam they take will be a better score. It'll be a straight line to the moon. They're thinking this. And unfortunately, that'll never happen. There are going to be bumps in the road. And the reasons why there's bumps are, we'll get into in a minute, but you are going to have this. You are going to have this. No question that's going to happen. Because honestly, if there were no bumps in the road, if standardized test preparation did look like this, then wouldn't everyone succeed? Like, think about that. If it actually looked like that orange line, who would stop? This is positive reinforcement at every juncture. Why would anyone stop? If every time you took a test, you got a better score, why would you ever stop? You wouldn't. Doesn't matter where you start, you keep getting better. This is easy, and it's like digging a ditch. Every time you shovel, you're closer to being done. It's positive reinforcement. That's not what this test is. It's definitely, there's going to be some bumps in the road, and some of those are going to be because of how the test is organized, and most of it's going to be idiosyncratic to the person. There's internal variables that we're not maybe mindful of. Another thing that's happening is as you learn something, whatever it is, learning how to read faster, learning how to do math faster, whatever, okay? The learning curve is in play. There's a slow beginning, an annoying beginning, where you don't get positive reinforcement. It's like, why am I doing this? Why am I giving up personal time? Why am I giving up sleep? Why am I giving up any of this? For what? And this is where most students fail. They're looking for positive reinforcement, they're not getting it, and they abandon. If they were just to get to here, they'd start getting the real benefits. Like, oh, I can do this. I can see positive reinforcement, and it's going to be awesome. It's going to feel so great. When I meet a student in this range, it's so easy to teach them. Like their study hours go up, that positive flywheel goes. Like, oh, I can't get them to stop studying at this point because they're like seeing these numbers go up. I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. I'm not there yet. I'm not at the end, but man, I can see the end. I'm really going to get good at this. And then, so as a teacher, this is the intervention where people like me are valuable, and here is where we're also valuable because it's a learning curve. Because you're learning something, you're going to plateau. And this is the difference between good and great. And going back a few minutes, you don't necessarily need a great score. look at your whole application. You know, you don't have to be perfect across the board to get into the fanciest schools. But with regard to standardized tests, if we wanted to make it as big of a plus as we can in the holistic application, at some point you'll be good at it, but not great. And that's where it really requires self-awareness into your error log, what's going wrong, not just simply classifying questions as good is correct and bad is wrong. Sometimes a correct answer that you took 4 minutes on is a terrible outcome because it cost you 2 others. Green check marks and red X's, that's too naive and too simple of a way of looking at a test. And so a person like me, experienced, who can look through your errors and say, you know what? Don't be happy about that 3-minute correct answer. That should have been 30 seconds with the right technique. And don't be sad about that red X, that wrong answer that took you 8 seconds. That was a good job. You dumped that question early. You knew you weren't going to get it right more than a random guess. You guessed, you didn't waste any time. Good job. You didn't get sucked in. So it takes some self-awareness on the student's part, and definitely a steady hand on the teacher's part to help you get from good to great. At this point, I just want you to be mindful these things will happen. Less talked about, but just as important, is the forgetting curve. The forgetting curve is, if you play around Duolingo, the language learning app, they use it. That bird comes in to remind you to study something because you're going to forget. If you're a human being, it's amazing how much we forget. The German psychologist Herbert Ebbinghaus is most credited with this stuff. He did some studies on memory about 100 years ago. And again, this is not for all people, for all things, but it's just the idea that we have a hockey stick memory. The interval between interactions will determine how much we retain. Now, if you have a wonderful memory, great. Your hockey stick might look like this. If you have a not so awesome memory, fine. It might look like this. It won't determine your final score. It just determines, like, it just means we need more repetitions and more, we need more baked in reviews, right? So just because you study percents on Monday doesn't mean you know it forever. In fact, by the next Monday, you will have some atrophy. So we need to bake into our curriculum some review time. You're probably going to have to hit something 3 or 4 times to fight that forgetting curve, and also parallel track, build that skill. So many students who fail, these are people I meet on information sessions. These are people I meet on, on Reddit, on Instagram. They just don't understand. Like, no, just because you studied on Monday doesn't mean you know it at all. You just know it on Monday, and your test is months from now. So we need to bake into the curriculum review. Another complication is that these tests are multiple choice, and standardized tests are all multiple choice. And that means there's going to be a sampling error. There are literally hundreds of concepts you'll study, and each test is only going to be, on the GRE side, 50-some questions, 54 questions. If you take the GMAT, it's going to be like 60-some questions, hundreds of hours of studying, months of studying, and it's all for what? 2 hours of testing, 2 minutes a question, roughly 50, 60 questions. That's it. Well, if there's hundreds of concepts and they only get 50, 60 questions, it means there's going to be a sample, right? And in the sampling, like a polling sample, there could be error, like a plus or minus 3%, which candidate's going to win, right? A lot of people don't think that. They think that each exam is the truth. Well, it's the truth for that moment, give or take some. This is not well known, but it's kind of obvious to people who understand testing and math. Like, no, each test is a moment in time where we think you are give or take something. Like, for example, this is probably a curve you've seen before. It's a normal distribution curve, which is a pretty close approximation to what you'll see on your testing. Like on the GMAT, let's say, a 605 on any given day, a person who's truly a 605 skill can very easily get a 545 or a 665 just because of the sample of questions. So maybe they're strong at algebra, but they're not so good at percentages. Well, a couple questions here or there, that could change it. Out of those 60 questions, you're going to guess on a good number of them, right? Let's say a person guesses on 6 or 7 questions. Well, what if 5 of those questions go their way? That could be 20, 30 points of gain versus a person who's unlucky on the guess. That's 20, 30 points the other way. So all the exams have standard deviations involved. And by the way, it's not like subjective tests are any better. Like if someone were to grade your essays, maybe you did an AP class, when you wrote English essays, like that's subjective too. So whether it's standardized test or subjective test, there's going to be error. We're choosing standard error. I just want you to know there is error. So your scores will vary between exams. This is about the algorithm and the sampling, but it's also about the individual. You're not the same person every day. You can't be. And mind-wise, you might be more receptive some days. Oh, I got that one wrong. Whatever. Next question. That's the healthy attitude. You might be on a certain day, you might get a question wrong and let that live with you for the next question. And it might be this negative flywheel, right? Physiology. How'd you sleep? What'd you eat? What time of day is it? Is it 8 o'clock in the morning or is it 8:30 p.m.? When are we taking this exam? Let's not pretend we're the same throughout the day. Also, the practice exams that you'll be taking are final exams, meaning you might be taking a practice exam when you really haven't covered all the material yet. So give yourself some slack, right? This isn't like school where you take an exam based on what you covered. Every standardized test is a final, and you might just get started. You might have just gotten started. So the coda, the ending to Laura's question about when you should take it, you should take it when your practice exams are good. Don't set a test date. That's not usually the best way to do it. I know that might work for other things. My taxes are due in April. Let me set a date that I will reach out to my accountant by March 15th. Right? You can do that if it's a simple just task job. But a skill job, a date doesn't work as well. I know people use them, and I'm telling you, put those in pencil. Okay, test dates should be put in pencil. You should start whenever you have some time in your life to do this. In our program, we give you 6 months to get it all done. So that's a pretty good, we hope, a pretty good chunk of your life to figure it out. But test dates, whatever you have, should be in pencil. I stand by that. Take the test when you have practice tests that are good. That's the easiest way to be successful. So test dates, schedule when you have a good practice score, create a team of accountability. Those down days, those down tests that are going to happen, right? It's not going to be a straight line to the moon. This line is very successful. This is what I hope for all of you. You start here, you end here, you win. But this is going to happen. So is this, so is this. And so there needs to be an intervention here, right? There needs to be a check-in, maybe with an instructor, maybe with an accountability person, a family member, a friend, significant other. Like, yo, listen, this is fine. This is what winning looks like. There's going to be ups and downs, and these ups and downs are caused by physiology, sampling error, right? Time of day, food. These are normal things. So don't get too high or too low based off exams going up and down. Think of it as a big trend line. Compare yourself from here to here. Compare yourself from here to here. Don't go test to test. That's human nature, but it's one reason why people aren't very good at standardized testing. They go test to test and don't acknowledge or don't understand. These are, there's error in these numbers. Another thing that I encourage all of you to do is don't delay gratification indefinitely. Okay. Outreach, talk to people who are doing what you want to do. Get inspired by them. They'll tell you the same thing. They'll tell you, most of them will tell you like this was pretty hard for them, but it was worth it. Grad school is worth it. The testing is worth it. And once you start visualizing yourself in those seats of power, seats of influence, or whatever you want to do, the testing can be what it's supposed to be. One part of a holistic thing, one road bump that is perhaps a way to mitigate some weaknesses elsewhere in the application. Perhaps it's a way to differentiate yourself. If you have already been differentiated, if the other stuff in your application is awesome, then don't worry so much about the standardized test. Do a decent job, do a credible job. You don't have to kill it. But think of it as an opportunity to differentiate if needed, and think of it as an opportunity to get ready for the rigors of the school that you will attend. Because they wouldn't require it if it didn't have any value, right? It's not, some schools, some programs have, made it optional or made it not required, and that's great. They found that it's not a predictor of success. It's not a test of their readiness for what they need in their school. But the schools that do require it, believe me, they look at these things, look at these skills, and they have longitudinal data to see what works and doesn't. And so it's a factor they like to use, but again, it's one of like 9 factors. You might have some GMAT GRE questions. Let me be very quick here. They're very similar. As someone who's taught both exams, written textbooks about both exams, they're more similar than dissimilar. If you're wondering which to take, the GRE is definitely the big tent. It's used by law school. Law schools can use GREs nowadays. It's used by some med schools. It's used by business schools. It's used by public policy, history, art majors. GRE is the big tent, and the GMAT is the more specialized exam. We can have a conversation if you like. I'd be happy to chat with you if you have any questions, or come to one of our monthly Ask Me Anythings. It's free if you have any questions. But in general, just know that the skills you'll develop are going to be pretty similar. Like if you see here, swimming versus water polo, that's the difference. Like one swimming, there's a stroke, and water polo is a team game, but you're still in the pool, and you're still got to be really fit and really have good endurance. You still have to shower afterwards. Like it's not that different. So if you have any questions about specialization, about what your deal is, feel free to ask me. In closing, we create this nonprofit for you, military folks. It's $200, $199 for our partners, and it's 6 months of access. It includes all of our program. You can take it, you can watch the videos whenever you want. It's really meant for a military audience who are forward deployed, but the thing that really differentiates isn't the quality of the program, which I know is best in class, but really what differentiates it is that human touch for those interventions, the steady hand who can look over an error log, who can motivate you, give you a pep talk, and actually tell you straight up, like, no, you're studying the wrong thing, or there's errors. This is a correct answer, but really it's masking a real weakness. We have office hours on demand, basically, every day. We have check-ins for the student that we can go over what's going on with you. So it's a hybrid model, and it's priced at, frankly, 1/5 or 1/6 of what it should be. That's what independent accountants have told us. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. LinkedIn, email me, Instagram, wherever you want to find us. We do have monthly Ask Me Anythings that you don't have to spend any money for. They're right on our website. Just, I think at the moment, I'm booked on the 3rd Tuesday of every month. I think it's like 8 p.m. Eastern. That's where we are at the moment. But regardless, every month I will be there to answer any questions you have about whatever. testing, admissions, whatever. Cool. That's all I had. I wanted to make sure that I covered everything. So hopefully you found some value in it.
Thank you, Nafis. For those who want to ask any further questions after this webinar, please email me or Nafis directly. And this webinar will be uploaded on our website. So for those who want to revisit this webinar, you guys can also access. And thank you everyone for joining today, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.